Tony D and Little Jones somewhere in the house, and this is a screenwriter's tip. And I had this thought. This is like my third take of this. I'm trying to make it coherent. Um, Something Sticks and Hammer said today on one of his videos about Joe Biden and how that ties into bad writing. So, what he basically said was he's trying to compare Joe Biden's policies with Trump's policy in this incarnation of the election. And he said, Biden didn't really have any positions this time around. And it's true. He's kind of avoided committing to anything, partly because I think he's totally demented and he can't keep two thoughts in his head long enough. But I think partly because it's his default position as a senator, because as a senator, he could always say these platitudes that meant anything. Like, I've always supported the American people, and sometimes you got to do what's right, and sometimes you got to do what's hard. Right? It means nothing. It can mean anything. You say that kind of thing, and you sort of imply you might support a bill. And then if you don't, you could always say, well, I didn't say I supported the bill. And if you do, you could say, well, of course I implied that I was going to support the bill, so I supported it. But as president, he can't do that, right? And he's trying to, so he won't take the blame for anything. So then when you come back on him, he can say, well, it's not my fault. I'm just the president of the United States, right? A similar thing, I think, happens in writing. Now, I don't have a visual for that. This is just the usual guys talking about Star Wars and the various terrible writing that's going on. But one of the reasons I think the terrible writing happens is this idea of indecision, because writers have to make decisions in their creations. And this idea that if you make a decision, you want to make it in such a way that it'll please everybody. But you can't. You absolutely cannot please everyone. So in the process of trying to please everyone, you please no one. And you try to create something that is all things to all people, and it can't work. It can't possibly work. If you don't take a particular path, and I don't necessarily mean political path, but if you need to take a particular path and go down a rabbit hole just to see where it leads a lot of times. And sometimes it might not lead to a great place or an entertaining place, but at least you went somewhere. And what happens a lot of times with rookie writers, and a lot of the people who took over these shows were just thrown, these jobs because they were the right skin color or the right person. They don't know what they're doing, so they attempt to do everything. Now, a lot of what they do is colored by their political motives, which is usually paramount, which is similar to what Biden does. Like, Biden does have an agenda behind the scenes, but he knows how unpopular that agenda usually is. And that to just outright say what he's going to do, well, that's not going to work at all. So he says platitudes until you elect him, and then he just does what he always does. So it's very similar with the writers. They will say all the platitudes, and then when they get down to writing it, a lot of these people would go back to what they always write about, which is, oh, the patriarchy kept us down, and a strong black woman's going to save us. And that's why you get black lesbian witches in The Alkalite, and a black gay doctor in Doctor Who, or the black empowered woman captain in Kurtzman's Star Trek, or whatever. Non-binary Mr. Freeze and gay Joker in the DCU games. All these things you get because for these people, they only have one move. They only have one agenda. They don't follow. Biden could follow the best idea to solve the problem, but he doesn't do that because he's not interested in solving the problem. He's just interested sell whatever it is he normally does, which is usually send a bunch of money to his friends. So it doesn't matter what the solution is, unless that solution involves sending a bunch of money to his friends. He's not interested. Same thing with these writers, I think. Unless the show or the story could naturally accomplish all the NPC talking points, the message, as the drinker would say, then they're not interested in pursuing a line of story that would do something else. So when I write, I often use my improv skills. And in improv, you learn that when you're doing a scene, you heighten. So in other words, you take something small and you keep doing it slightly bigger until it leads you somewhere. And that could lead you anywhere. The easiest example I always give is when we did basic improv exercises. One of them was called Straight Man, Crazy Man. The straight man would just be basically a normal guy, and the crazy man would pick an emotion and slowly heighten it during the course of the scene. And in the process of heightening their emotion, they were forced to make choices. And the purpose of the straight man was to feed, various things that would force those choices. So, for instance, you might pick the emotion of fear. The crazy man says, "Okay, I'm going to be fearful," and so you know that slowly over the course of the scene, he'll get more increasingly fearful, no matter what you say to him. So then it was the job of the straight man to feed him things that should not be fearful at all, that are the least possible fearful things, and slowly ramp that up in order to give him some sort of contrast. And he would have to struggle against that, right? Because it's hard to think of a reason why you'd be fearful of, I don't know, puppies. And you'd have to make up an excuse why you were fearful of puppies, like genuinely fearful of them. And that's hard to do. But it's easy to just repeat the message over and over again. It's hard to justify something that would actually challenge that message. Like, why should black lesbian space witches just take over Star Wars? Why? That doesn't make any sense. Seemed like we had a pretty good thing going with the Jedi. Why are suddenly they important? They're not really answering that question. They're just telling you. And that is a bad move. That is a rookie move in stories. Why suddenly does a black gay doctor exist, and why did he split from David Tennant? Like, none of it makes any sense. It doesn't jibe with what's gone before. And that's another thing you learn in improv. You say yes and. So you take what's gone before, you acknowledge it by saying yes, and then you say and to add something to it. See, these people could have added lesbian space witches to Star Wars, or added a black gay doctor, but they didn't do that. They took over the old doctor and rewrote everything. And that's the worst possible thing you could do, because you're undermining everything that's gone previously. From a story standpoint, that's the worst thing you can do. But from an agenda standpoint with these people, that's exactly what they want to do. They want to not only rewrite Star Wars, Doctor Who, or whatever, but completely undermine its history to say, no, that was completely false. What's real and true is what's real and true in life, because they want to rewrite reality too, is that really it was without black empowered women, we'd be nowhere. And those are the only people you need to acknowledge, not the awful white supremacist men who built these shows or whatever. The patriarchy. So it comes from that lack of indecision and that sort of mindset of, we got to insert the agenda. So they don't have the writing skills to actually insert the agenda in a clever way. And they don't care to do so because no one's stopping them. At least in old Hollywood, if this had become a trend, they would have forced them to slide the agenda into the background. It would be a bunch of metaphors. It wouldn't necessarily have worked, but it would have made for much more interesting writing. It would be tolerable. Star Wars would probably be doing okay if you were doing it in a subtle way. Like the subtle way would have been to say, not that the Jedi has always been a bunch of hypocrites who really just murder the lesbian space witches. It would have been, well, you know, the Jedi are corrupt. They've become corrupt over the years because they ignored the lesbian space witches, who were pure and wholesome and wonderful over the years. And a few of them fell to the dark side and slayed the lesbian space witches. And that's how the Jedi became corrupt. Oh, but the lesbian space witches, no, they're not corrupt at all. They could have done that, and it would have at the very least given them some more mileage of the characters before the fan base completely revolted. But part of it is, in Hollywood, I think, just pure attention. And just like when you raise kids and they become bad, dysfunctional kids, where any amount of attention, good or bad, is good, so they just get a lot of bad attention because they realize that's the quickest way to attention. I think a lot of these creators are that way too. They just want tons of attention. They want to be able to be on yet another podcast to say, well, you know, the real problem is the patriarchy. And don't I sound very clever and smart by saying that? And aren't I stunning and brave to take all this criticism and make this show, even though I'm being attacked? And that, I think, is more important to a lot of these people than the money, if you can imagine. Anyhow, that's my thought for today. I'm Tony D, Little Jones somewhere in the house. I'll be back with more videos. Check me out Friday at Valenzano Wineries from 5 to 7 in Chemung, New Jersey. I'll be doing my talk on how to hunt the Jersey Devil in the tasting room there. They've got blueberry wine. Come on out. I'll also be at Mood's Farm on Saturday from 10 to 5 for the big Blueberry Festival. And then on Sunday, I'll be at the Pirates and Mermaids event in the Dragon Shops in Bridgeton, New Jersey. Hope to see you there. We'll see you in the next one.